Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we gather today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's great to have you all here today, students, teachers and, of course, the artist Patricia Piccinini, so that we can discuss Curious Affection as an exhibition and hear from you, the students. I'd like to begin with a fantastic quote that was written up in the Arts Hub review of the exhibition, which is really pertinent to today. This exhibition needs to be seen by every school student, every science student, every architecture student, design student, gaming and technology student, as it offers a non-threatening and erudite way to help us navigate and imagine our future world, the kind of gut reaction, human connection that textbooks and classrooms cannot teach us. And the time is right for art to lead those discussions. So thank you to Gina Fairley for that, because that's exactly what we're here to do today, is to have those discussions. And this program, the Q&A for secondary schools, is about you asking the questions and leading the discussion as students, rather than us giving you the questions. So thank you to all those students who've pulled together questions and are able to represent their schools and their fellow art students today by asking Patricia those questions directly. And we'll get straight to it. So can I begin with Matthew from St. Lawrence's College?
Hi. My question is, do you think that artists have a responsibility to provoke public debate on current issues such as technological ethics?
That's a really great question. And it's something that I deal with a lot, because it's actually quite unusual for artists to engage in these kinds of ideas, actually. And I don't think that it's a responsibility or an obligation to do that. But it's something that I want to do in my work. And I'm interested in ethical problems, and I want to discuss them with my community, and I see my work as a kind of catalyst for conversation. I think that there's a lot at stake. Being in this age of the Anthropocene, there's a lot going on, and I just don't understand, to be honest, why people aren't talking about these things in the arts, because they seem incredibly vital to me, and that's why I do. So put the first picture on. And so I'm going to try and discuss your questions in terms of works. So I made this work called The Young Family. I made this piece in 2003. And it's about the idea of growing human organs in other species, xenotransplantation. And at the time, I mean, you guys must have been like 2 or 3. Is that right? Yeah. At the time, people thought, oh, that's science fiction. It's a dream. We want that, of course, but it's not actually going to happen. But now we have actually created the kinds of creatures, not exactly this, and in fact I don't make work to think in a way to say, oh, this is where we're going, and this is a cautionary tale, and we shouldn't go there, and this is a bad thing. In fact, it's much, much, much more complex than that. This work is about the idea that this creature has been grown for our benefit to grow human replacement organs in her and her children. And the real strength of this work is when we ask the question, would I sacrifice her child to save mine? And I would. Absolutely. But at the same time, you have to look in her face and you see that she's sentient and she has a relationship with her children. She's thinking about them being cut up. She's sitting there thinking, what's going to become of them? And you can see it in her face. And it's a completely emotional situation. This is not a kind of science exhibit, or it's not a kind of some, esoteric argument about these ethical dilemmas. It's completely emotional. And in fact, it has to be. Because when we come to make decisions about the way we use this technology, it is going to be emotional. And it has to be. And we need to figure it out together. When we shouldn't leave it to the experts. It's too important for that. Yeah, so things to do with how we relate to the life that we change and create around us are vital to me. And I think they should be to everybody, and especially your generation, because this is your world. I'm 50. I'm here for not much longer. This is your world. You guys have got to make these decisions.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Matthew.
So Cara from Shearwater.
Hi, my name is Cara Angel. I'm from Shearwater, the Steiner School in Mullumbimby. And what does being an artist mean to you?
Okay, what it means to me is being part of the cultural conversation. It doesn't mean that to everybody, and it shouldn't. Not every artist has to be an artist that shows in museums and wants to make work that people can engage with and connect to. There's lots of reasons why people make art, but that's what it means to me. And I see myself as a kind of meaning maker. So we find ourselves in a situation, and I want to make meaning of it with everybody else. And I kind of make stories and therefore make space around what happens in the world. So I'll give you some examples. So this is a recent image of deforestation in Indonesia. And basically, a football field gets felled, the space that amounts to a football field gets felled every 25 seconds. This kind of image can't hold me. Like, I could make work like this, which is kind of documentary style, and like it's not hard to do this work. And I could make work that has this kind of violence. And this is violence. Let's call it what it is. This is violence on the earth, on the people. We all know this. I don't have to tell you guys. This is your world. You know it. And in fact, if I was you, I'd be super angry, as I am. So I can't make work like this because violence begets violence. So it can't hold me in this situation. So what I do is I make a work like this, which is not violent. It's about empathy. So when we allow forests to be felled for crappy palm oil, orangutans lose their environment. And this is a problem. Not just for them, but I don't have to say this. It's so obvious. So what I do is I make a work like this that shows an orangutan mother. And orangutan mothers are amazing. They keep their children with them for 6 years, and they teach their children what to eat, when to eat, and where to eat it. They're the most nurturing and the most amazing caregiving animals that I aspire to be like. So I have a lot of admiration for them, and I'm sad that they're being driven to extinction. So I make this work where we see an orangutan mother, and we look at her and we say, oh, she's not quite orangutan. She's got a lot of humanity in her. And then she has a child which is even less orangutan, more human. And then her second child is completely human. And so we look at this work and we say, oh, it's a family that's made up of less and less animal, more and more human. And we think, oh, they're different. And then we realise that, in fact, that's not the point of the work, that they're different. the point of the work is that they're connected, that they are connected. And this is a beautiful family. And that they have the kind of connection that most mothers aspire to with their children. And that's quite an optimistic and good thing, and rarely seen in the popular media. And in fact, I defy you to find another image in the art world that talks about orangutans. They just don't exist. And so when we look at this, we think we can connect to it emotionally. It's like a myth. Myths allow you to connect to things emotionally that you can't in the everyday world because it's too hard. But when you can connect emotionally, then you can go and have agency when you act. And that's what you guys have got to do. You have to act. You have to stop this. Not that family, the logging. Because these kinds of families, these kinds of creatures are going to happen. But this is the kind of story that makes space, in fact, then for other stories, for the new generations to come in. They've seen this story, and then you go out, and in 5 years' time, you make your own artwork and you make your own story, and somehow it's informed by this experience that you might have had in the gallery. Because that's how I have created my stories, from my history, from seeing artworks and reading books and being out in nature and, well, for me in nature. It doesn't have to be nature, but that's what's important to me.
So fantastic to start with two questions that really speak to the role of the artist, and to hear Patricia really speaking from her role as an artist, to challenge you as art students to be involved in meaning making. So I like how you flipped the question to a sort of a number of actions and calls to action for the students to consider in their experience of your work and of the world they live in. What a fantastic start, and flows nicely onto our next question from Cavendish Road student Emma, who's really speaking from your age group. Thank you, Emma.
Hello, my name is Emma Carruthers. I'm the grade 12 representative of Cavendish Road State High School. Our question for you is, at our age, which is around 15 to 17, what was the subject matter and styles of the art that you were interested in the most?
Well, actually, I have quite a story, because when I was about your age, that's a perfect question for me, because when I was about your age, one day I was walking to school and I just thought, like I think when most teenagers do, you've really kind of had enough. And just one day I just really had enough. And I just kept walking past the school. I kept walking. I grew up in Canberra. And I just ended up kilometres down the road, like literally hours down the road. And I ended up in this brutalist building, the Australian National Gallery. And I'd never been there before. I knew it was an important place, but I'd never actually been in it. I knew it housed Jackson Pollock, which brought down the Whitlam government, which was a really terrible thing to happen. We didn't actually bring it down. It was instrumental. Long story. Lots of things. Anyway, so I went into this gallery and I thought, I don't really know what's going on here. I don't know any of these works. I don't know any of these pictures. I'm not quite sure if I should be here. But it seemed like it was a place where I could just be. And I liked looking at these pictures and trying to figure out what they were about. And it seemed less constrained than the stuff that I was doing at school. Look, you can't do it every day, and I wouldn't recommend that. And I could have ended up anywhere else. And luckily, it was the gallery, and it wasn't it was quite a big moment for me, because I thought, I want to be part of this place. I don't quite understand it, but I want to be part of this world where ideas are flowing, they're not restricted, they're visual, And in the gallery were, at that time, Peter Booth, who is an Australian artist and very gestural. And I really liked his work. This is a very doomsday image, and it really struck a chord with me because at the time, we, like in 1984, 82, 83, 84, we had this huge nuclear scare in the world. And so we were all demonstrating, this is a bit after, we were all demonstrating on the lawns of Parliament House against mutually assured destruction. And there's a lot of fear in the world, a lot of fear that these two big giant powers could just mistakenly let technology take over and just blow the planet up. And I felt really helpless. I felt really despondent. I felt really dark. And this Peter Booth picture just beautifully encapsulated that for me. And at the same time, there was a Philip Guston, he's an American artist, and I liked his humour. His work is also quite dark and a little bit kind of dystopic. Like things in his world aren't quite right. They're funny, but they're not right. And his work also. So at the time, I was looking at this gestural work. Years later, of course, I'm not doing anything like it. But at the time, this was there in the gallery, and it was really inspiring. I could connect with it. And yeah, I guess when I was younger, I was more interested in making art that was about my feelings, my personal feelings, how I felt. And now, as I get older, I'm not as interested in doing that, which is more this work. Like he's got quite a idiosyncratic iconography, which means that he repeats the same signs over and over again, and they pertain specifically to him. So to understand Philip Guston, you have to know a little bit about, what boots or eyes mean or whatever. But you can still still understand the feel of it. But yeah, as I get older myself, I'm not so interested in expressing what my personal feelings are, Patricia Piccinini's everyday feelings about the world. I'm sort of more interested in ideas that relate to everyone and that we can connect with. Of course, the work comes from me and my experience, but it's not as sort of related to me. And that makes sense when you look at the kind of work that I do. It's quite realistic in some ways.
And we understand that many of you following this event are heading into the exhibition, so you can experience that very interaction of being in front of the artworks off of what Patricia's just mentioned in terms of once the work is out there. She's very much interested in your interaction with the work. Our next question from John from Ferny Grove speaks exactly to that point.
Hello, I am John Delaney from Ferny Grove State High School, and our question for you is, can you elaborate on the interactions which occur between the sculptures, the humans and transgenic creations, and also what drives this interaction?
Yes, these are all great questions. I have to tell you, they're actually better than a lot of journalists give me. So thank you. Okay, so I'm interested in relationships. We're social creatures. You can't exist without relationships, like literally. Like, as babies, you would just wither and die. And in fact, babies without who are just fed and not looked after do wither and die cognitively. So, yeah, I depict relationships. I'm interested in all kinds of relationships between people, and animals, between people and technology, between us and the environment. And I depict them because in some ways they're a way that we can kind of relate to the work. Like when you see this piece here called The Bond, can you imagine what it would be like to have a child that looked like this? Or can you imagine this kind of a relationship with a creature that's not human? Is that possible? And they're hopefully the sorts of questions that arise when people come up to the work. And I think what happens is that people look at it and go, oh, God, that's a bit intense. That's a bit gross. And so they're pushed away. Like that creature wouldn't want to give birth to that. And so pushed away. And then you're kind of pulled in because this kind of intimacy is actually quite beautiful and nourishing and just a beautiful thing to behold and to be part of that kind of relationship yourself. And so you're pulled in. And what happens inside of you is like you're pushed away and then you're pulled in and a space opens inside of you. And you ask yourself, well, what do I think? Like, do I hate this or do I like it? And you have to ask yourself that question. That space is rarely afforded to us. When we see movies, I love movies, but you're often, force-fed stuff. This is what you think. When you read paper, there's always an opinion. And there is, of course, there's an inclination here. I could make this work a lot more violent or disgusting. I could do that, and then you would feel that. But I feel that there's a certain amount of ambiguity that leaves space for the viewer to come up with their own response. And that's the beauty of art, to have those moments. And maybe those moments might be transformative. Maybe you might learn something about yourself. Maybe you might form an opinion. That's a great thing. And I think art can do that. And so with The Bond, I'll tell you a bit about this child. This child is obviously not human, but it's not just a chimera between two species. This child is conflated, blended, commingled with a sandshoe. So its back has the treads of a sandshoe on it. And so what it's talking about is that in this world that we live in, more so than ever, and it continuously will keep on going, the body is seen as incredibly amorphous, which means that it's likely to change at any moment. It can, and it's the potential to change. And it's not particularly definite. It's not specific. And that's because we understand that DNA is very editable. We can edit it. We can blend things together. And we share our DNA with almost everything on the planet. And that's a realisation that we've come to through science and through what we're doing in science. And this is incredibly exciting. It's wonderful, actually. And it also changes what it means, how we relate to other animals, how we relate to the body, and how we see the body. So, that's The Bond. Now, this is a bit more literal. In a work like this one, which is called The Carrier, there's a bit more ambiguity. So what we see here is a bear-like creature that is carrying a kind of an inferior, but still kind of amiable human. Like, she's still very open. Like, she has her arms open, chest open, and they have a connection. They're touching. So they have a relationship. We're not quite sure what that relationship is. Like, is he her servant? Because he's carrying her. And he's naked. So it kind of implies a hierarchy. And we wonder about that. We wonder about the relationship we have to the animals that serve us, the animals that we might create to serve us. And in fact, you could even think about slavery, because we think that slavery has died out, but it hasn't. There's still lots of people that are enslaved today. And we look at this work, we're not quite sure what to think. Not quite sure. Don't feel that great about it. He's very imposing. Like, if you notice, I went to great lengths to give him a kind of sagacious look. He is wise. He is thoughtful. And she too is open. And their hands mirror each other. They're connected. They're looking in the same way, which implies not only a physical connection, but an emotional connection. So it leaves us wondering about these situations.
Such a fantastic question, I agree. Thank you, John, for that question, which is really talking about process and process of the interaction between an art object and an art audience. I think to continue on in that spirit, where the next question really talks to process, but before the object becomes a resolved piece. So, great to have two questions that really speak to process, because that's what you as secondary school art students are really investigating, is your process and your understanding of the creative process. So shifting now to Georgia from Parklands Christian College.
Hi, my name is Georgia from Parklands Christian College, and our question for you is, in the work The Stags, how did you go about your process, especially with the motorbikes?
Okay. Like with any artwork, the most important part is the idea. That's what I think. Like, first of all, you have to come up with the idea. And those ideas don't come along very easily. Like, I spend a lot of time just coming up with bad ideas. And then occasionally something will arise to the top. And so the idea behind this was, I was looking at these mods, and they embellished their Vespers. And I love that, because I'm from the suburbs, and so what happens in the suburbs, as some of you might know, is there's a lot of car culture, and yes, a lot of pride in our automotive capacities, I suppose. And it's an art. It's an art. Anyway, so I've done a lot of work around this area, looking at the idea that technology has become so natural to us that it kind of has a natural sort of, it can take on the life cycle of an animal rather than a machine. So the work with the Vespers, it's about the idea how technology is becoming increasingly naturalised in our lives, so natural that it can take on a life of its own. The other work that I've been talking about is about how nature is becoming increasingly technologised. So it's the same idea, but it's the opposite. And that's why they belong in the same world. And so when I go out onto the streets and I see a herd of vespers and think, oh, they're like deer. They're like wild deer, not even cows, not even domesticated cows. They're actually like wild deer. That to me is a kind of phenomenal, and I want to make a work about that. I want to depict that. I want to discuss that. And there's actually quite a lot of joy in it, and beauty, and fun. And also, there's a kind of kernel of complete and utter fear. Because when you imagine that technology is autonomous and has a life of its own, just like when I was 18 and if you pressed one nuclear warhead, then all the other ones would go off without a human being involved. That's autonomy. It's terrifying. So I wrap up these quite difficult ideas in beautiful things, beautiful surfaces and stories so we can discuss them. And so what happens is I just draw it, and then in the studio, have you guys seen that movie outside that shows my studio? Yeah? Well, obviously I don't make my work by myself. I have a whole studio of people that help me make the work. It's a really long process. A piece like this will take 18 months, and it will involve many people. And so the first person is me. I come up with the idea and the drawings, and then I worked with a digital modeller. In my case, it's Dennis Daniel, and we've been working together for a long time, and we come up with a digital model. And then, in the past, I used to work with a car modeller, and I would say, here's my drawings, just make them out of clay. But those guys have kind of died out. That generation's gone, which is really sad. And so I just now work with 3D outputted foam, and then that's hand finished that's Tox there, and he does all the hand finishing, so he puts on a layer of surface on top and sort of works on any flat area so all the highlights are right. And that's a pretty long process. They can take months. It's incredibly laborious and actually quite technical as well. It's not an easy thing to do. And then it gets painted, and that's also quite a big thing. So the way that they're painted is it says a lot. Every single tiny part of it speaks. And so Scott Seisman does the painting, and that's out of my studio because I don't have a spray booth. And I think I have one more image of this. Oh, that's Peter, my partner, and he's assembling them in our studio. And so parts from Vespers are incorporated into it to give it a kind of verisimilitude to the real world. And we get metal parts as well that fit, that need to be made specifically. So yeah, it's a long work, and it takes a lot of people to make this work. And so in this exhibition there's two of them. So there's the one where they're dueling, and then there's actually another one where they're in a kind of oppositional state, where in the dark gallery there's the kind of tigery motorcycle on the kind of vespery deer, and that is I made that for this exhibition, and that work is actually based on a very, very long-standing visual trope that exists in the art world, which is this depiction of nature. And I wish I had a picture of it here, but artists throughout the ages have depicted nature in this way. Maybe I have it. depicted nature in this way, where there is a predator and a prey, the preyed upon, and yeah, that's a trope. That's many artists have done that, and I wanted to do one as well. There's a beautiful one in the National Gallery of Victoria by Stubbs. It's a horse and a lion. It's really evocative, and it talks about the brutality of nature. And so I'm interested in how nature is depicted, and looking at nature through the eyes of a community that's technologised.
Fantastic. We're on track for another 2 questions, and we'll shift now to a student from Mansfield State High School.
Hello, I'm Dan Lee from Mansfield State High School, and our question for you is your work informed by certain concepts or themes from your background or cultural heritage? And was there a particular past experiences that contributed to your evolution as an artist?
Well, that's an interesting question, and a lot of artists mine their own lives for content for their work, and that can be beautiful, and I love that kind of work myself. But I don't do that. I don't say this is me when I arrived in Australia, or this is a work around it. There's value in those works, but that's not what I do. Having said that, I can say that 2 things have really contributed to the way I see the world. And the first one is being a migrant. So I came here when I was 7, and I come from a family of migrants. So my mother migrated to Africa, and then I migrated here with my mother when I was 7. So, and her family migrated to England from Ireland. So, yeah, so being a migrant, it kind of gives me a kind of understanding and a kind of sympathy of what it's like not to be included, to be outside. And in my work, I try and focus on that, and I often do. So with a work like this, So with a work like this, which is in the caravan, we look at these 2 creatures, and they're in a caravan, which kind of implies isolation, maybe social isolation because they have to live in a caravan park, or maybe they're on the road, so they're mobile and they're a bit isolated. And I sort of bring that sense of a kind of empathy for difference. And in fact, in my work, I ask literally, what is the space for difference in our lives? But there's always a kind of warmth towards that question because I identify with it myself. And I identify it personally and also rationally. Like, I know that whenever we have a big migration, it's great for the economy. It's just a great thing. And I love multiculturalism. I love being around people. So I can't see the downside of it. And I hate the way we treat refugees. So I'm always going to be that way inclined. There is always going to be a kind of positive representation of otherness. It's not going to be completely over the top gross. And so when you look at these guys, they're obviously chimeras. They're bear people. And I was thinking about Frankenstein. So Frankenstein's monster gets made, and Frankenstein rejects it. And then the monster barely recovers from that because it's so hurtful. And he asks his father, Frankenstein, well, make me a mate. And Frankenstein says, oh, okay. And then he doesn't. And that's sort of the last straw. And that's why the monster comes back and kills his family. So basically, it's a story of bad parenting. So this is almost like the anti-Frankenstein story. In this work, they do have their partner. And they have each other. And they might be the last two in the world. Or they might be the first and only two in the world. But they have each other. And even though they're very different and, well, I guess you could say monstrous, there's a lot of beauty in their intimacy. The other thing about this particular work is that it depicts an idea of a relationship between a male and a female, which is not very current in our world. I'll ask you, you will not find an image of a male resting his shoulder on a female in the public. That does happen in private, but you will not see that, ever. And I think that does a disservice, not to women, but to men. You cannot ask people, men, to be strong and never rest. You just can't do that. It's crazy. They do go crazy. That's why they go out and shoot their families when they can't cope. And these toxic ideas of masculinity are a problem. And this is why I make this work. You don't... Of course, this male is beautiful. He looks like that guy in Star Wars, doesn't he? Kylo Ren. Don't you think? He is beautiful. And he is strong. But he is allowed to rest. You know, he doesn't have to be vigilant continuously. And to me, I think that's a great thing to show, to have out in the public. Because no one can be like that the whole time. No one. And when you have the strength of a relationship, you can do that. So this work is about intimacy. And the second thing that happened to me was I grew up in a household of illness. My mother was sick, actually, when I was 12. She was diagnosed when I was 12. Yeah, she had cancer. And then she died. And so I know kind of what it's like to be at the mercy of technology, wanting technology to save you. And so when I make these works, I don't say, oh, technology is bad. And in fact, very conservatives often take my work and rip it off and say, if you guys don't stop making innovation in medical technologies, this is where we're going to end up, and they'll have one of my sculptures. And they get it completely wrong, because that's not... I don't want to stop technology. I actually want to... it's impossible to do anyway. I actually want to discuss with everybody else the direction it should take and how it changes the way we are and the good things it will bring us. In my case, it would have been great if I had a replacement liver for my mother who had liver cancer and never drank. That would have been really great. I would love that. And so I'm looking forward to those things, but at the same time I'm thinking, how does that change the animals that serve us, that we're going to use? our relationship to them. You know, how does that change the way we see the body? And yeah, it's their kind of conversation catalysts.
Now, when I first heard you speak about your work, you really emphasised that relationships are at the heart of your practice. This next question speaks to that, and in many ways you've already touched on multiple examples of where relationships are fundamental. So for our final question, Dion from Wavell State High School.
Hi, I'm Dion Kirov and I'm from Wavell State High School. So my question is that your work discusses connections and relationships between mothers and children, family groups and couples. Was there a particular past experience that led you to follow that theme in your work?
Well, yes, as I said, I'm interested in relationships, all kinds of relationships. And if you're born, you're born of a woman, and she may not be the best mother, but she will be your mother, and that's that's your first relationship, and with that comes some responsibility, and so I return to that a lot, and it's pretty important, and actually undervalued. That's why we don't fund our yeah, it's undervalued, and I try to valorise it. And so I'm going to talk about this work because I am a mother, so that's an important thing in my life. And in the past, it wasn't a great thing to have a family in the art world, but now it's acceptable. It's acceptable to be a woman in the art world, which is great. And you can even have children. So I talk about it a lot because it's an incredibly fundamental thing and yeah, undervalued. So let me tell you about this work. So when I was pregnant with my boy, who's 13, two things happened. One of them was I went to a party and my husband's friend said, "Oh, I'm from Africa too." And when my sister was a baby, she was abducted by a baboon. And we got her back straight away, but that baboon had lost her child and wanted to replace her child with my sister. And I thought, wow, that's intense. Like that we think that the boundaries between species are so strong that that sort of thing is unimaginable, replacing your child with an ugly human child. But for her, the grief that came from that sort of enabled her to do that. And I thought, yeah, I can relate to that. I get it. Because if I lost my child, I'd probably want to do the same thing. And I was interested that this boundary collapsed in front of me as I was pregnant. And then the second thing that happened is when Hector was born, I found it really hard to breastfeed him because it's not easy and you have to learn it. Someone has to teach it to you. It's not intuitive. And my sister said, "Oh, why don't you breastfeed my son, Philip?" He was 6 months old. And I thought, no way. That's just not going to happen. But I did breastfeed him, and he did teach me how to breastfeed. And then I was able to breastfeed my child. And another barrier came down. This boy taught me what to do because he just did it, and then I could do it. And it was, a moment of transformation for me. And that's why in my work, what happens is that I present all these things that are incredibly intertwined, commingled, blended. And the reason why I do that is because I'm saying if it's possible to see these situations where everything is intertwined, can we continue to believe in the barriers that we erect to keep us different from other animals? Can we do that? Because they're not real. And it's those barriers that allow us to treat other animals in these abominable ways. And that's just not on anymore. Like, it just isn't. And that's why I make the work. And that's why they're all blended. Because that's the world we live in. And anyway, so getting back to this sculpture. That's why this baboon mother is breastfeeding this child. And obviously she's not his mother. And she has an obvious physical connection to this child because she's breastfeeding him. That's deep. And incredibly valuable, by the way. Breastfeeding children is a super important thing to do. And we shouldn't try and tell third world countries that they should buy expensive milk to feed their children because it's better. That's a heinous crime. So she's doing it, and we look in her eyes and we see that her eyes are the work. The work is what she's expressing in her eyes, and what she's expressing is a kind of conflict. We're the parents. What is this relationship? She's in it, but what is this relationship? And we are left to ponder, what is this relationship? And that's what we need to ponder when we put thousands of sheep and let them rot on ships. We need to think about that stuff. And so, yeah, it's not. Look, this work is complex. It's not easy, and it's not for everyone. Really, it's not for everyone. And in fact, a lot of people just don't get it. They really don't. They think, oh, it's ugly. Oh, the baboon's got a big bum. Yeah, that's
a baboon.
Yeah. So it's not for everyone, but it is for people who are interested in, opening their hearts to these issues that are increasingly more and more and more important for your generation. Yeah, you will live with this. I'll be gone. But you guys, you're going to have to deal with it. I feel very sorry about that.
It's a very powerful note to end on, Patricia. So firstly, can we thank Patricia for joining us today? So just like to quickly summarise a few points that came through the process, and I know we're somewhat over time, but really, and flipping it back on that last point about a call to action on your part, venturing through your wonderful questions that have asked Patricia to speak about her background, her influences, what her work means to her and how she relates to her audience. So much in there for you to think on. One point that we really think about a lot here at the gallery in terms of learning and engaging with art in the gallery is transformation and the transformative power of work. And that was definitely a theme that came up with Patricia talking about transformative experiences for her, but also that last point again, Patricia, on thinking about, well, how is this work confronting? And if you as young people are prepared to ask the questions and dig deeper, how will the work transform you, help you shape an opinion, and help you learn essentially. So I'd like to thank as well all of the teachers and schools who've made the mission here, and also acknowledge the students over in Cinema B. We're thrilled to have so many students come and hear from Patricia and ask questions today. So thank you to Brisbane Grammar School, Cannon Hill Anglican College, Cavendish Road State High School, Ferny Grove State High School, Mansfield State High School, North Lakes State College, Parklands Christian College, Shearwater from the Mullumbimby Steiner School, St Lawrence's College, Tambourine Mountain State High School, Wavell State High School, and Springfield Central State High School. So fantastic to have so many schools here, and to know that you're going on to see Curious Affection and also the high school excellence exhibition, Creative Generation. Enjoy your day, and thank you all very much. Cheers.